take you all through what's in store for discussion in this session. Well, as we all know that in today's new age business landscape, fostering a culture of DEIB is much more than just a moral responsibility. Well, it is a business imperative. Then how of doing business is becoming more important than the what of business. Well, this session and our panelists will deliberate on how DEIB practices can be seamlessly integrated into business strategies to unlocking and creating business value while driving social impact. So now that I have all your attention towards the stage, can we have an attentive round of applause as I invite our moderator first to spearhead this conversation. Please put your hands together for Mr. Rajesh Padmanabhan, Chairman, Hono, Managing Director, the Exco Group and CEO, Talavi. Warm welcome to you, sir. Where is the energy? Come on, let's bring all that energy and put our hands together. May I also please invite our panelist, Ms. Anupama Kaul, HR Leader, Cummins India. Joining us next is Ms. Madhavi Lal, Managing Director, Head HR, Deutsche Bank. Warm welcome to you, ma'am. Next up joining is Mr. Prateek Mehta, CHRO, Mahindra Sustain and Teku. Warm welcome to you, sir. And next up joining us on stage is Ms. Nabamita Banerjee, Head Human Partner Resources, Starbucks India. A warm welcome to all of you, and over to you, sir, to take this forward.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Priya. Stage is set. Thanks so much. I know we are slightly running behind time, but we should be okay by the end of the day. And there's lots coming, so let's hold it out for some time. I know it's been a long day. Okay, I think absolutely delighted to have a panel like this. Very distinguished, done tons of work. This is not going to be a preaching session because this is a session which is hugely emotional for a lot of us, and plenty of stuff in terms of what's happening out there. So, as Priya said, I think the blurb that we've written talks about, this is much more than a moral responsibility. And all of us are different, all of us are at different stages as far as DEIB is concerned. There have been lots of successes and we've come along very well in the last few years, but there's plenty of still unfinished work in this space. So let's explore together. And let's try and learn from some of the best in this space and go ahead in this particular route in terms of how do we take the next leap of faith in this space. There are a lot of topics which may not have very conclusive kind of end or finishing points, but nevertheless important to touch upon them. Because if you remember, years ago we spoke about digital when we did not understand, as somebody said, what's the difference between conventional IT and digital. We spoke about blockchain today when we started scratching that maybe a couple of years ago. So all of that are coming of age. So even in this particular session, we'll be making some attempts and we'll learn from the learned and the wise. And thanks for being here. I mean, all of them very distinguished in their space. And it's a privilege to be chairing this particular channel. Panel, I said channels. The how of the business is becoming more important than the what of the business. The what of the business has clearly got a lot of competitive landscape. Many do what we do, but a lot of customers are asking, it's important for us to understand, how are you running your business? Tell us, how are you running a business? So the how part of it is becoming much more important. The DEIB practices have got to be really weaved into the overall business strategy, and we'll try and figure out in terms of some of those value creations. We don't want to be talking about it at qualitative levels. We'll try and touch on some of the impacts that it has created through examples if we can, but that's the endeavor. Creating diverse and inclusive talent is definitely a very deep, inclusive commitment for all of us, and I'm sure all of us are committed to, doing this, so we will do this. I think one of the biggest stuff that's shifted in the last maybe the post-COVID era is what we've learned is we've been using this balanced work life for a number of years. I guess the shift has happened in terms of it is life work and maybe not work life. We all realize that work is just a subset of life and not the other way around, with the way it was practiced in the last 50 years. So let me dive straight into the topic, and I'll tell you about the design of this particular panel, and what they bring. Of course, they're all distinguished, as I said, in their own space. But I think important to introduce Anupama, the head of HR for Cummins. And I believe Cummins is really right up there. I mean, a gold standard organization as far as this particular DEIB practice is concerned. So we're going to, learn a few things. But she's humble, modest. She says, there's still plenty of space to be covered. So thanks, Anupama, for being on this panel. Nabamita, Starbucks, and we all know, we all see it, we feel it. Plenty of equity and fairness, plenty of belonging stuff that we see as far as Starbucks practices are concerned. So thanks for being here, Namamita. We want to learn a few things in this particular space from you. Madhvi, I mean, I don't need to introduce Madhvi has been a towering personality in this function for years, has been a champion as far as DNI is concerned. And again, when we were talking ahead of this particular session, she's been vulnerable and even confessed to a few things. Story is not complete, so that's a passion. I mean, at times Madhvi can become even obsessed, from passion to obsession in this space. So thanks, Madhvi. We're going to, learn a few things from you. And Prateek, I mean, somebody whom I met recently. I mean, maybe just a few months ago, but very inspired in terms of what he brings and some of the initiatives that he's doing for Sustain, which is Mahindra Renewables. So happy to be learning a few things from you, Prateek, and thanks for being on this panel. Thank you. Absolutely delighted to be moderating this session. I'm going to jump into you, Anupama, straight. How can organizations have DEIB principles and strategy really weaved in, because you really have this entire mothership and you guys have been doing it for a number of years. So how is it like really, and I'm intrigued by one statement that she made. One of the questions I had was, or one of the discussion thread I had was on DEIB audits. So the first response that she gave me was, DEIB audit, no, we don't do DEIB audit, but this is a value for us. So it's overriding, it's the real roots of the organization, it's as fundamental as that. So I think over to you, Anupama. Just want to know, how do you really weave in this entire business strategy? How do you really bring DEIB right up there? And I'm sure it's been a journey which has taken so many years. So if, of course, all of this, maybe in a couple of minutes, I know it's always challenging, but we'll love to hear how you've gone through this journey and share your story.
I think, thank you for having me on the panel. I think it'll be very difficult to talk about the entire journey, and what I'm going to say is nothing new that you're going to hear. But why I can say that confidently is because we've been in this journey globally from 100 plus years, in India 60 plus years. We firmly believe that talent does not exist in one category of any population. So if as an organization we want to grow, we want to compete in diverse market, we want to come up with innovative customer solutions, you need diverse talent in your organization. And that is how you will be able to stay ahead of competition. So it is just business imperative for us. And it's been since, like I said, decades for us now. I'll give you one example. When you get, we're a manufacturing organization. So when you get women on the shop floor, you have to make sure that your machines are ergonomically designed. Now, does that only help women? No, it also helps the men. What's the end result? It helps in increasing productivity. It helps you to do your job with more effectiveness and efficiency. So those are the examples which makes us believe that how diversity is important. And like Rajesh rightly said, it's just a part of our value system. When it becomes your value, it's your foundation. And when it's value, every employee has to live by that value.
Thank you, Anupama. I think you really saved some time for me. I mean, you covered it fairly quickly. So, I'm going to have a follow-on on this. I'm sure you did not start this as a value. I mean, I know it's 100 years kind of a journey that you were alluding to. But how deep is this practice? And where do you see some of those stuff which needs to be reinforced again? How do you really maintain consistency of this as you go around the organization? Because, putting a few things in place, I'm sure you have policies, you have practices, you have deep down workshops being done. All of that are there in place. But when you see something not holding out or not coming together, and particularly when you have a lot of talent externally being infused, how do you reinforce this? How do they really start off? I can understand somebody who's like a Cummins employee for life or, for a number of years, you practice that. Suddenly you land from outside. I'm not saying your value systems will be way different, but how do you ensure, to do the sensitization? How do you onboard them? Because you need all of them to be right up there. So I think that's the follow-on.
I think first is, like I said, it's setting the tone from the top. It's driving the accountability from the top and then cascading it down. You can't make these changes wanting it to be ground up. The second is that we have defined targets. If you don't have targets, you're not going to make the moves, make the shift. So every year, we critically look at ourselves. Like, Rajesh was saying, yes, comparatively, we may have done well, but our aspirational goals are way higher. And that's what we continuously measure ourselves. So this is like driving accountability from the top. Every leader is expected to personalize their commitment on D&IC. It is not just left to having long conversations. So that's how you get measured. We have a very strong onboarding system. It's globally designed, and when we get external employees, from the very first day, they get sensitized to what Cummins' values are and where we are wanting them to make the shifts. And then there's, of course, continuous learning that happens throughout their tenure with us. And it's not that we don't get it wrong at times. We do. But we do have processes, policies in place. It's a part of our leadership behaviors. Diversity is what we expect every leader to demonstrate. So those are multiple ways of ensuring that people get on board, and you need to have patience as you're getting people on board also as they learn or relearn of how they need to work and embrace what we are standing for.
Awesome. I think that's really deep. I think once you've said that it's a value system in terms of DEIB, I think there's an absolute complete holistic inclusion, and it becomes as strategic as that. Nabamita, I'm going to turn to you on equity and fairness. I know Starbucks is absolutely a compulsive player in this particular space. So is this track important? I shouldn't say important. Is this track, practical? How do you really do it? Because many of them really suffer in terms of understanding how do I maintain consistency as far as equity and fairness is concerned. And you guys have done a reasonably good, guys have done a sensational job on this, in this particular space. So how do you do it, and what are some of the measures to test this? So it's all about equity and fairness, demonstrated capabilities, demonstrated the world sees it all. How have you done it, and how do you measure it?
Thank you, Rajesh. First of all, delighted to be a part of the panel. And before I start, we're 470 stores across 70 plus cities. So in case you've not experienced us, please visit us. I think the journey from equality to equity is what's interesting, and it often attracts a lot of questions. I'm going to rewind. So Tata Starbucks now in India is 12 years, so we're still not entered the teens. But this was in 2014, and the female representation was only at 16%. And to me, honestly, it was baffling because we were not representing the gender representation that we saw in our customer base. So when we, of course, deep dived, the three big problems were one, of course, females leaving because of the 3 M's, as we call it, maternity, mobility, and marriage. The second, in the candidate representation, we saw it was less than 20% where females were applying for cafe jobs. And then the third, where you can't do much, is the Shops and Establishment Act, which requires organizations to provide transportation in case females are working beyond a certain hour, typically ranging from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. across different states. And I think that was when we said we're going to be intentional about it. And we started with equity-led practices. So a lot of our hiring happens through referrals. And we said that, if you were to refer a return-to-work talent, you'd have you receive a higher referral bonus. It was as simple as that. Now, if you look at the impact, Of course, it drove the behavior that we wanted. But more than that, a lot of these return from work talent wanted to work in flexible shifts and flexible hours. If you look at our business, we have peak hours and we have shoulder peaks, which basically means you don't have the same number of customers coming at every day part of the business, and hence it helped us get more efficient. That was one. Second, all these people who were in flexible roles earlier were typically the students, and we did have a higher turnover there. And this set of population who came in, I think, looked at it in a long-term way, and the retention again increased. So again, small initiative, but impact to the business, and I think that helps it sustain. The second one, so we have today 7% of our stores are all women-led stores, and the ones that close earlier, it's easier now for us to convert. We actually invested in transportation routes across few routes. We have 5 routes which provide a drop facility to females, and it's a first in the QSR. Today we can attract females who can work in closing shifts, which was never an enabler. We can attract women who have a hobby or education that they're following in the first part of the day so that they can work in night shifts. So I think, I think one thing that got established is there's no conflict in driving a business and doing the right thing through this.
Thanks, Navamita. I think it's again a journey which is well established, and I think you put in a lot of effort to make this happen. Good work, and continue the journey. I'm going to get into a very difficult topic. We are going to be pretty vulnerable on this. I'm touching upon aspects of neurodiversity and cognitive. Yeah. So not that we have answers. We tried speaking to each other as a panel as well. Why I'm touching some of this is clearly. We know we are scratching the tip of the surface as far as these topics are concerned, but there are like really global employers who are doing a fascinating amount of work, and maybe Cummins is a little way ahead of the rest, but definitely important for us to know. I think the first one is, clearly the cognitive, the neurodiversity part of it. The differences in the way our human brains process, the variations and the cognition part of it, is something that has got to be included in the DEIB charter. Yeah, and companies like SAP and Microsoft. Microsoft has something which is clearly there for hiring for autism. So whether it's autism, ADHD, dyslexia, inclusion, I think these are all not stuff which are consciously done, but there are very, as I said, gold standard employers who are getting right up there, and that's true inclusion. It's not about, talking about just gender diversity or doing a few things in terms of inclusion. So that's precisely why I said that, if my research is right, even, at depth, we would be talking about maybe 5% or 10% of what this practice can really take us to. That leaves us with almost 90% of real depth that needs to be explored to get to the highest level as far as DEIB practices are concerned. So neuro and cognitive. I think the other area that I'm going to touch upon, maybe I'll park it for the second phase of the question, but I'm going to come to you, Prateek. Prateek, clearly, I want to know the returnees part of it as a good initiative of sustain and renewables, but importantly, your take on neuro and cognitives.
Okay. Let me set the context on this a little bit, Rajesh, and not many people are aware about it. But
your mic is a little light. Can you give it up?
Okay. Not many people are aware about this, but I am actually a dyslexic. I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in my school, and typical to most Indian parents back in the day, this about 35 years back, they didn't understand what it was. So for them, I was somebody who was underperforming by the standards of my peer set and the standards of my siblings and everyone else. And they couldn't fully comprehend what are some of the challenges which I as a dyslexic used to face. To be fair, it's not their fault. Okay, I don't think I have fully comprehended some of the challenges which I faced until a very later stage in my life. Rajesh, when you started this panel, okay, and let's make it a little bit practical. Let's make it a little bit real. When you started this panel, you had a piece of paper. You read off that piece of paper, right? For someone like me, reading off a piece of paper is almost impossible because I won't be able to read in a straight line. I will jump lines, right? So what is a natural habit for you is an aspiration for me many times. Very often I get invited to, can you give us a keynote? Can you, introduce someone? Here is a script for it. Now, one would think that this is a great honor. Oh, look, I'm getting a chance to introduce Anupama. I'm getting a chance to introduce Rajesh. For me, that's horrifying, because that means I have to read off a piece of page. Nobody knows about this condition, and I'm not very vocal about it. And I think probably this is the first or the second forum where I've openly disclosed it and said that I do have dyslexia. I do live with it every day, right? But what happens is people tend to judge people with neurodiversity with a certain lens of typicality. What's so difficult in doing this? Why are you hesitating? What is the pause for? Are you being arrogant about it? Are you being difficult about it? No. Nobody is being arrogant. Nobody is being difficult. But do you understand that there is some degree of shame and embarrassment and awkwardness attached to it as well? Actually, most people don't realize that, right? So when we start looking at everyone through the same lens, that's when equity goes for a toss, right? What I would like to be known for is some of the strengths which my dyslexia brings to the table, and which fellow dyslexics also bring to the table. Dyslexics are known to be excellent problem solvers. They are highly creative, extremely visual animals, right? Very, very resilient. In fact, some of your best sportsperson, Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian, happens to be a dyslexic. Elon Musk is on the autism spectrum, right? By choosing to not judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you're doing it a service. You're creating equity right out there. So that's my point of view when it comes to cognitive and neurodiversity.
Thanks, Pratik. And please put your hands together. It takes a lot for someone to. And when we invited Pratik for this particular panel, he was the first one to make a disclosure saying that this is what I am, and I would definitely want to, talk about it, this part of the journey. Now, do we realize how difficult this practice can be? And that's the reason I'm saying we're still possibly at 5% and 10%. We all understand a little bit of LGBTQ. We understand gender. We do some amount of work in this particular space. We do run a few programs and initiatives, but genuine depth in terms of true inclusion comes from the fact that there are differences in the understanding the neuro and the cognitive part of it, and how do we really include this is the unfinished part of the charter that we will all want to get into. Madhvi, I think the next one is, we've already gone into a little bit of depth as far as DEIB is concerned. But I want to, as a leader who has been in the industry for long and right up there, it's a boardroom question. So, are there discussions at the boardroom level? Are there, stuff that's really spoken? Is there dedicated time given on topics of DEIB, and particularly, we all speak culture at times, maybe in the boardrooms. But is there a very focused kind of, and I'm saying this with a reasonable amount of disclaimer that a lot of confidentiality and a lot of disclosures and all of that will need to be put in place. There's organizational maturity, but is there board time? Is there an agenda set out? Is there dedicated focus set out when you're really running after business objectives? So my question is, how much of board commitment, how much of involvement, and how much of real hands-on direction.
Thanks, Rajesh. First of all, thanks for having me on the panel. And like you said, I'm almost obsessed with this topic. And the first time I faced a bias was when I was expecting, and this was many, many years ago, eons ago. My boss, who's a lovely, wonderful person, told me that, you were not here for the 3 months for statutory leave, 3 months I took leave without pay. So he said, you were not there for 6 months in the year, so I have to lower your rating, I have to lower your bonus. And I was like, really? I mean, can men really have kids? And, women, biologically, women will have kids, so is it fair? And I kind of felt, I said, something wrong with this whole approach. And I'm glad that 30 years later, things have changed. But like you said, things have to change a lot more. And Prateek, I'm really sort of very impressed with the fact that you've talked about this. And I myself have, when we've been on this journey of, DEI, we actually had launched a program where we told people that, freedom to be sort of, to declare who you are. And a couple of people actually sort of came out and said, I'm neurodivergent. So I reached out to one of them to say, listen, I want to understand what your issue is, what your challenge is. And this person told me that I have a problem with numbers. Between 6 and 9, I can't, differentiate. And he's in analytics. So I was like, oh God, we've hired somebody who can't differentiate, and then he could see my expression. He said, but I have a system in place that corrects me when I'm doing this wrong. And he's one of the best analytics person we have. For me, that was a pivotal moment where I thought, like, Rajesh said, we haven't even touched the surface on these things. And this person is really doing very well. And this is last year's conversation. He's got a promotion recently. And something that at least I would not have been able to relate to if I hadn't spoken to him. So I think all of us need to do that deep dive. Coming to your question, Rajesh, and sorry for the long prologue, but there are boardroom discussions. I think leaders intuitively want to support DEI for various reasons. I think one, it's a social obligation. I think apart from the business, it's also a social obligation. We have to sort of correct centuries of inequity. And I think all leaders know that. All leaders also know that if they don't support this initiative, they're not going to be called leaders. So there are boardroom discussions, there are targets that most of our leaders have balanced scorecards, which actually measure how you've done on all strands of diversity. Plus also we have culture pulse surveys, which measure how much your team is feeling belonged in the organization and included in the organization. So those measures are very much in place and are required. I think Anupama touched upon that, what gets measured gets done. I think what gets measured and rewarded gets done even better. So I think it is important to have those targets,
Thanks, Madhvi. This is a question to all of you. I think since we've gone a little talking about and making confessions and disclosures, is there any one unique stuff or an unconscious bias that each one of us had, and I'll also go on this particular question, which we were not aware of and we were made aware of, and how did we respond to that at a later point of time when we were made aware? I think that will truly give a little bit of a reflection on how we understand and how we deal with this particular topic. Can I start with Anupama?
A pretty challenging question. It's, unconscious bias is something that you, unless somebody really shows you the mirror, you're not really aware about it. I'll give you first my example as a leader in my growth, in my journey as a leader. One of the things that happens that we demonstrate as leaders is when we are passionate about any topic, the way we come across sounds decisive while we are still wanting to get more views. And I was given this feedback by my team that, Anupama, when you speak, it just means that you're not open for any more suggestions or you're not open for diverse views. Now, for a leader who's been practicing diversity, belonging to an organization that wants to encourage diverse view, this feedback was like a hard reflection or a mirror saying, I'm not doing that because of the passion that I bring in. So this one is something I consciously have now been working on, Rajesh, because diversity doesn't mean just numbers. It's about encouraging diverse view in that moment at the table, especially if you think that you have the decision rights. How are you making others feel inclusive to be part of that decision? So this is my example for you.
Thank you, thank you. You really set the stage by that confession, and this is why you're right up there as comments. And thank you, Anupama, for doing this. Pratik, your confession of an unconscious bias that you were made aware of.
I think it's very, very similar to what Anupama just said. Have you ever observed a meeting room and nobody sits next to a leader? You know that chair next to that leader, that poor person is left, often. For whatever reason, we believe that this leader, he must be smelling bad, or something is going wrong out there. And the unconscious bias is that, like Anupama, I get extremely passionate about my particular point of view. To some extent, it happens because, I might have designed that particular thing, or I might have a strong opinion about it, or I might have researched it, or whatever that may be. But I can come across as being decisive at times, and then the feedback which I've gotten in exchange is, do you realize you are very intimidating? And I'm like, how is that possible? I mean, my wife thinks I am a panda. Okay, I mean, how is this possible? I consider myself to be a warm person, but the reality is that empty chair next to you, it shows you how very welcoming or unwelcoming you are. That is a reflection of who you are, right? If someone's comfortable to sit next to you, then they're also probably comfortable to come up to you and have a conversation about it. And that's, for me as well, it's taking a step back and saying that the next time I'm having a discussion or a meeting or anything, why don't I be the last person to speak rather than the first person to speak? Yes, I do have the decision-making rights on that particular point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be letting my point of view be known in the first 30 seconds. Maybe it can be in the last 5 minutes, but certainly not in the first 30 seconds of the conversation.
So very well said, and I can relate this really. As you speak, I can relate to it. How many of us experience that when we go into a meeting room in the first part, we sit in a particular chair, and after break we come back to the same chair. Nobody has earmarked that chair for you. Right in this meeting room, there's no earmarked chair for anybody, right? We go back to the same chair. I mean, absolutely bang on. As you were saying, I realize we keep doing this all the time. Those are all the unconscious bias. And I'm sure many unconscious bias are we've shown, but how do we respond to this? If we go back to that and create that comfort zone around, we start owning that space, we start owning every bit of it, get into a complete couching level and start completely, not letting go of that space, how can we even get to deeper aspects of building DEIB practice? So that's where the shift begins. So thanks so much for bringing that to light. Navamita, your turn to tell what's the unconscious bias you learned.
Confession. I'm going to sit next to Pratik to start with. I think, I don't know, being in the HR profession, it's tough to make this confession, but it's true. I think when I started and I was in talent acquisition, the first thing I would look at the CV is, okay, grades. Has to be a distinction in case, the person, because I would relate diligence, sincerity, aptitude, of course, to that. And I think, especially, of course, in Starbucks, it was, and I remember my team looking at me and saying, this is the role, there's skill sets, there's experience, and I, of course, learned from my team, and it's very different, of course, the view is very different now, but again, being open to diversity of experiences, of people coming from different walks in life, and experiencing different skill sets, I think that was an eye-opener. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Navamita. Madhvi, your turn.
I'm thinking hard, but I think one of the, initially when I first got my job as head of HR, and I would, obviously when you have meetings, there's some people who don't speak, some people who speak a lot. So you tend to kind of favor people who speak a lot because you think they're thinking through. But I've learned over the years, and some of the team members did tell me that, you need to include other people into the conversation. So I always in meetings, people who don't speak, I ask them for their views. And the insights you get from people who don't speak too much are far, far more deeper So my team told me that is you don't let everybody speak. You have to invite people to speak. If somebody is not speaking, don't assume that nothing to say.
Thanks, Madhvi, and time for me to make a confession. I used to be very crabby on Monday mornings, 10 to 12, and I wasn't aware of it. So, there are quite a few of people sitting in this room also who worked with me, and they would also, agree to that. And this feedback had to be given to me through my wife. So I wasn't aware. It was a complete unconscious bias. That like touch me not between 10 and 12 on a Monday morning. Everything, life starts after 12 o'clock on a Monday. That's the way it was. So it was a clear unconscious bias. But importantly, there was, one feedback I had to give to my colleague at the board level. And that was something very difficult. And I'll share this example. He was a CFO of the company, and he had a very weird body clock where he would sleep once in 2 days. Now, the CFO sleeping once in 2 days, that was his body clock. So he would sleep once in 2 days. Obviously, then what does he do the night that he's not sleeping? He keeps the system awake. So he does reviews on that particular night, and it was very tough. Now, again, at that point of time, I had to possibly reprimand him, speak to him, really, said it's a clear no, etc. But did I know how to handle that particular situation? No. So he had definitely an issue, but maybe in hindsight, I would have handled it very differently today compared to what I did at that point of time. It was like I went after him a little big time, say that this is like, you can't keep the whole system awake just because you're not sleeping. So those are some of the, weird learnings. I'm again getting into a difficult area now. And all of you will possibly feel it. Not all of us have answers to it. But all of this, starts from the fact that we are all swearing in by technology is the new denominator, the way we run our function, right? Everything is AI, Gen AI. We're all talking about predictives, analytics, blockchain. So technology right up there. So have we even realized that technology is throwing up a lot of new biases? And plenty of new biases. So we clearly have situations where technology is throwing a bias in terms. I'm sure many of you would possibly relate to this. When somebody is not showing up on a video, is throwing up a bad connection, you'll say, yaar, iska to permanent problem hai. Kabhi bhi will never come on video, always bad connection hai. Or somebody working from home. This workplace flexibility, we've been talking about it since morning, has huge biases, right from the top man, clearly saying, show up right there, to the last man saying, I care, I can give up this job, but I will not show up. So it's as, wide as that, but those biases do exist. So some element of how we're dealing with this, there are sensor-based stuff, there are elements which are actually coming into play that we're putting in place, but we're not being aware. My only plea is, just try and be a little aware of, how technology is adding a lot of newer elements of biases, unconscious biases many a times we're not even aware of. The ones you're made aware of, maybe we should attempt to, address them. And the only way to do all of this is like feedback and reflection. One of the reasons why we went through this feedback round is, unless we are empathetic as a leader in terms of really taking those feedback and going through the process of reflection, I don't think we will be able to put a real sound practice in place as far as DEIB is concerned. So let me turn to, all of you or each one of you, maybe technology is a new bias. Any challenges that any one of you see? Is there anything that you would, I think Anupama, you did have something to say in there. So technology is a new bias, and what are the new challenges that you're seeing? And anybody who wants to add to what Anupama does, feel free.
So I'm going to give you two instances. One, the very first time that when Cummins decided to go for no punching because we want to measure, especially for professionals, we said because we want to measure you for deliverables and not for the kind of hours that you spend in office. Even at that time, there was a lot of resistance and fear of misuse. And that's the first thing that comes to our mind. Everything is going to get misused, right? And so that required a cultural shift. Similarly, when COVID hit, it was technology that came to aid. A lot of the organization were able to meet the business targets in spite of COVID being in place, was because technology supported and employees were still productive in spite of working from home. So when we started getting back to the so-called normal way, we said we're going to go, and a lot of organizations have gone, the flexible route, the hybrid working for some categories where we can really manage to do that. While at an organizational level, we could have come with norms, kind of hardlining it. What we said in Cummins was that we're going to leave it between the managers and their teams to decide the norms. So that the fear of employees saying, if I'm out of sight, I'm out of mind, needs to be addressed, as well as there's a need for the managers and leaders to have some discipline in the way they'd want to drive some work deliverables or work ethics. But we want to keep it flexible. We want to empower managers and leaders to drive that discussion. So that's how we have gone about it, what we call the team norms. And so far, it's been working pretty fine for us. We do face challenges, but that just calls for more transparent conversations, candid conversations, so that it doesn't remove the flexibility, and it addresses some of the fears that may be in mind of employees or the managers. The biases get assumed, but technology is an aid. I would say that.
Thanks, Anupama. Would anyone else want to add something on technology-based biases, conscious, unconscious?
Okay, just not on technology, but I think our fundamental premise is that people are going to misuse it, and I think nobody gets up in the morning thinking that they want to mess up. I mean, who gets up in the morning saying, show of hands, anybody got up today saying I want to mess up today? Nobody does that. So I think we've got to trust people, whether it's technology or working virtually or people not wanting to come on screen, etc. That's what my view is.
Right. Anyone? Otherwise, I go to the next track. Yeah, I go to the track of, thank you, Madhvi. I go to the track of belonging. Yeah, Navamita, I think, again, I look at, Starbucks clearly being right up there as far as belonging is concerned. It's a critical dimension, and it's something which is needed for psychological safety. How have you created? You spoke about equity and fairness, but belonging is like really, that sense of belonging, that sense of, that feeling. I know it's deep. I'm unable to explain because if you can actually tell me, how does this really work? How do you make them really have a pride and sense of belonging? How have you built this practice?
Yeah, I think, of course, from getting people to feel they're included and then move to a space where they feel they belong here is the shift and is the desired shift. Belonging happens to be one of our 5 core values, and it's interesting that these questions come up because we just closed on some work on revamping our employer value proposition. So across Starbucks markets globally, we did an exercise to ask them what keeps them here and what is something that they're proud of. And when we looked through the responses, the word that came was belonging. And in fact, the following week, if you visit our LinkedIn handle, every hiring creator will say, here we belong. So I believe what makes that distinction is when people have that psychological safety to feel, I'm bringing myself to work. And I feel empowered to challenge the status quo, voice something that might be different to what, say, my manager feels or to my colleagues feel. And hence, I think as an organization, it is critical to enable listening platforms. If you listen to people and you are agile to flex your decisions and your strategies based on what you listen, you create a belongingness. And I'll give you an example. So we, of course, run the experience surveys like most organizations do, and we do go through a lot of qualitative feedback in detail. And one of the feedback, this was years back, again, this was 2016 or 17, when somebody said, people in corporate get 5-day work week, and yes, we are retail, but we work 6 days, and can something be done? And honestly, I think most people would shut it down and say, hey, this is unheard of, and there's a cost to it. And again, very, very proud to be a part of an organization where the leadership actually sat and said, can we work this out? There's so many discretionary costs that we incur, and is there a way to balance it? And again, today, we continue to be a 5-day work week from that time, and imagine how the partner might have felt. We call our employees partners, sorry, who would have written that comment to see that this became what the organization embraced. So yeah, I think moves like that, when you are listening and when you feel accountable to your own people, makes them feel where they belong.
Awesome, awesome, very profound, and thanks so much. Do you measure belongingness?
Yes, again, there's a score to belongingness. So again, in our experience surveys, it's tracked for every leader. And it is a value. In fact, we have value awards. So there are leaders, again, inclusive leader, somebody who creates an environment of belongingness. We crowdsource stories from our people, and they are celebrated. So what gets recognized, I think, gets embedded as something that's very core to us.
Thank you, thank you. I was a little ambitious to build some analytics around DEIB, but I struggled, and then Pratik had a very nice observation. He reversed it. He said that instead of, talking about analytics, let's make analytics as something which is enabling, and let's talk about DEIB, which is relevant, which is accountable, as we get into the space of figuring out business impact. So can you complete that thought, Pratik? It was a very nice thought that you were building. So can you, and I think Madhvi, you had something to add to that, right? So Pratik, can you lead, and Madhvi to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Mahindra Group, while we've always promoted, diversity and inclusion, over the past 24 to 36 months is where we've really, started to double down on it. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean churning out data graphs and just saying that, hey, look, here is the number of women I have in my team, or, these are the number of, washrooms I've created. Is that it, right? And to my mind, that's not what it is. You can actually look at diversity through a slightly different lens. And that's what we did within our own, within our group. So we actually created a self-certification framework, which can be customized for your sector, right? So, and let me give you an example of my own sector. Renewables has probably one of the worst diversity ratios across industries. I mean, we had commissioned a study last year. The number of women within the renewable sector is within the single digits. I won't even go down to actually tell you what, because it's appalling, right? Thankfully, Sustain and Techco put together, we are significantly ahead of that average. But that doesn't mean that there isn't room to do more. We don't want to be just better than the average. We would like to show the industry what's the way forward. Now, what that means for us is actually taking on some targets rather than just measuring the analytics around it. So we actually said, okay, if I were to win, let's say, a silver medal, what would silver look like? What would a silver standard of certification look like for us, right? What would a gold standard of certification look like? What will a platinum standard of certification look like for us? And we actually started taking on hard, tangible business-led targets around this. So one of the targets which we've taken is around returning mothers. We do want to very consciously have returning mothers within our workforce. If you think about it, and I think someone on the panel had actually mentioned about the three M's as a concept. I think it was you. Maternity is the highest price a woman actually pays within her career. I mean, that is terrible. Imagine you've taken time off to have a child, and now you're being penalized to actually have a child. And the person who's penalizing you has come from a mother. So now you're basically penalizing mothers, right? I mean, how terrible is that? If you can just pause and think about it for a moment. So we said that, okay, can we actually proactively start working with search firms and say that, hey, look, we are looking for women who've taken anywhere between a 6 months to a let's say 3 years career break, and we are happy to earmark positions for these roles and say that these are for returning mothers, because we believe that they can add a tremendous amount of value. And before I joined Mahindra, when I was part of Deloitte, one of my most complex projects was led by a colleague of mine who had just come back from maternity, and let me be very candid, that was one of the most profitable projects we eventually ended up doing. So I know that there is a great business benefit, right? So when you start taking on targets of this nature, when you start really adding value and meaning to it, instead of trying to just analyze and crush the data and crunch it and try and make it sing a song which works best for you, that's when you start really actually getting the value out of your DEI proposition, right? So that's my perspective on that.
Thank you. I think that's significantly added depth to business impact.
Yeah, sorry.
But you have to
Yes.
keep it very brief, Navamita. I'm sorry.
Yes. I couldn't wait. But I'm a return to work talent as well. 3-year break. And I can tell you it was difficult to, felt different to open Outlook after 3 years. But rest is history, I think, thanks to people who I worked with.
Awesome. Madhu, you had something to add? Okay, we are almost there. I've been reminded, when Pratik started, I was told 5 minutes, so we have just maybe 1 or 2 minutes. At best, can take a couple of questions, but it is to be very, very brief. It can't be an A and a B and all. So if there's any, quick, top of the mind question, and if you can direct it to someone, happy to take that. Just raise your hand and we'll get you the mic. Anyone? Yeah, I can see one hand there. Can we have the mic? Yeah, the mic is coming to you.
Hi, I'm Rahul. So the question goes regarding DEIB. So while fostering DEIB is crucial for businesses' success, right? How can organizations ensure that efforts to celebrate uniqueness and equity don't unintentionally create silos or divisions within teams, and instead promote cohesiveness and collaboration? So it's for all the panel.
No, for want of time, I think let me direct this to just one person.
That would be best.
Anupama, you'll have to take this. Yeah, being right up there, I think. Yeah.
I think what happens is that when you're so in this journey, it just becomes difficult to comprehend. The way I look at it is, if you embrace diversity for what we stand for, you actually unify to celebrate the uniqueness. And celebrating diversity would never lead to division, because that's exactly one of the fears we talk about. We're talking about this misuse, fears. If it becomes a part of our narration, and if we know that this is where our success lies, we will celebrate together the uniqueness, and that will create inclusion. It's very difficult for me to comprehend that it will create divide, actually.
Anupama, you're such a delight. You package all of this in a minute and a half. I don't know how you do it, but that's an amazing skill which we got to pick up from you. I mean, this is one topic of DEIB where I thought the panel spoke from the heart. And that's the reason you felt it, right? The decibel levels of this particular session was much lower compared to the others, because all of us were possibly speaking from the heart. And it started with confession, it started with reflections, it started with, making a lot of, confessions about unfinished stories, and trying to be ambitious on a few areas where we do not know it all. But thank you, panel, and you've been fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for this wonderful panel. Yeah. And thanks for being part of this. We've really enjoyed. Thank you so much. Back to you, Priya.
Thank you so very much. Well, let that applause gallop a little more. Come on, everybody, because I think that was some wide range of perspectives when it comes to DEIB. And thank you for sharing those individual journeys with us. It has truly been endearing. And thank you for adding a lot of value to why we are here today. I would now urge Mr. Rajesh Padmanabhan to please felicitate all our speakers with a memento, a token of appreciation. So if you could felicitate all our speakers with a memento right there. Would like to thank our speakers, beginning with Ms. Madhvi Lal, Managing Director, Head HR, Deutsche Bank. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Would like to thank Ms. Nababita Banerjee, Head Human Partner Resources, Starbucks India. Let's give a round of applause for them. Would also like to thank Ms. Anupama Kaul, HR Leader, Cummins India. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and making us a part of that journey as well. Would also like to thank Mr. Prateek Mehta, CHRO, Mahindra Sustain and TICO.